I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Mary Kissel is here, the host of her own show at WSJ.com, which is the website of the Wall Street Journal. She does the show live each day at 1 p.m. on the East Coast, and I'm directing my remarks to Australia. Mary, next week we'll be going to Tasmania. I met Tasmania for the first time last night. It was a great treat.
How fabulous.
A wonderful little village of 1,000 people, 2 pubs, and 1 school, and it's eager to meet you. But right now we're speaking to Australia morning, so I want to remind you, it's 1 p.m. East Coast time, live for Mary, and then she's rebroadcast. You can go up now and see all of her work. Right now we're going to the work that's ahead of all of us who comment on the news. This is Larry Johnson of NoQuarter, and it is the day after Darrell Iss's committee hearings on the Hill, 6 hours, the full committee, the House Oversight Committee. Larry, good evening to you. Mary's here, and I want to start with the news peg tonight because it requires analysis and explanation. There are calls, including calls in the Republican House to Speaker Boehner for the release of Benghazi emails. These are emails that relate to the attack on September 11th, 2012. What emails, Larry? What are they after? Is this State Department stuff? Is this more bureaucratic hemming and hawing? Or do we believe that there's a rich vein here to work? Good evening to you, Larry.
John and Mary, good evening to both of you. Well, this is part of the new era. You know, during my time there 20 years ago, email was not used. But what has rapidly evolved, particularly in these crisis response instances, is that there is a great volume of email, or now you can call it record traffic, that details who's telling whom what. And as Mark Thompson in his testimony pointed out, that he sent an email direct to Undersecretary Patrick Kennedy. Pat Kennedy worked directly for Hillary Clinton. Pat Kennedy was ultimately in charge of diplomatic security. And Pat Kennedy informed Mark, again via email, that a discussion had already taken place with the White House, and the FEST, in this case, the Foreign Emergency Support Team, had been ruled out. Well, those kinds of conversations and decisions are reflected throughout. They also released an email yesterday with Beth Jones admitting the day after September 11th that it was, in fact, an Al-Sharia attack. So the administration's spin is coming up against the reality of the electronic trail. And the electronic trail makes it very clear that from the outset, both State Department's Hillary Clinton and her senior advisors, as well as the White House, including Barack Obama and John Brennan, his counterterrorism advisor, and Tom Donilon, including the National Security Advisor, that they all were aware that this was a terrorist attack, and they did nothing.
In those 6 hours of testimony, though, Larry, there are a lot of lines pointing towards Hillary Clinton, but still not a lot of clarity of when she knew it was a terrorist attack. Did she advocate sending in military help? Was she involved in the talking points? But we do know from yesterday that Gregory Hicks was very much downgraded in his job after he agreed to talk about this. This is the number 2 in Libya, and that a very close Hillary Clinton associate called him and basically lambasted him after he wanted to get the story out. So, Larry, what are the key questions here that Hillary Clinton should have to answer?
Well, Hillary Clinton needs to be put under oath and asked if she ever discussed with Patrick Kennedy the security request for the mission in Libya that encompasses both the embassy and then this facility that was charitably referred to as a consulate. But Pat Kennedy, I can't underscore this enough, and in terms of how State Department works, that on issues like Libya, which was certainly in the top 5 of foreign policy interests, those are not routine matters. Many of the Democrats tried to argue that the Republican claim that because Hillary's signature was or name was affixed to a cable that went out, that's routine and it does that for everybody. What they're ignoring that in this particular case, I'll guarantee you, from what I know, having produced cables like this and having been involved with situations like this during my time there, that the Secretary of State absolutely knew. If she didn't, her Chief of Staff, Cheryl Mills, knew, and Patrick Kennedy, he damn well knew. Yeah. And so what we are faced with here is that, I think what the Republicans did smartly yesterday was to advance the case factually in terms of what we know, and then to be able to establish going forward. The next question to come in is now no longer a question of were the talking points altered. They've got a documentary record to demonstrate that what the intelligence community provided the policymakers was quite different from what the policymakers ultimately released and spread on the national news circuit.
But I think it's important to emphasize that this isn't about a gotcha moment, that we had 4 Americans killed, including an ambassador, an attack on our own soil, and yet the president did not vow to go get those guys, and here we are many months later, and we still haven't apprehended the guys who did it, and we're no closer to it. But what about the president, Larry? All we know now is that the president had exactly 1 phone call around 5 o'clock, and then what?
Well, and that's again, you've got to. I come at it from the context of having worked in the Counterterrorism Bureau of State, and having been when an incident would unfold, and you got to understand when you get the first call, we don't know what the outcome is. We don't know what the time limit is. We don't know when the end will come. We have to respond based upon that immediate information, and there is a system in place that immediately spins up. I mean, we use the term spin up, and what that means is now you get video conferences. You have senior people like John Brennan at the National Security Council. They'll be on a secure video conference with appropriate personnel at state. That could include the Secretary of State. That would include Pat Kennedy. That would include whoever the senior person is.
Larry, I want to make sure, because you're talking about conference between state and the White House. Did I hear you say very clearly that from the testimony already established, there was a conference call between state and the White House?
Yes.
Prior to the turning off of response. That happened, and it's documented.
Absolutely.
And we know who was on the call at the state end. Do we know who was on the call at the White House end?
No, we don't.
All right, I'll stop you, Larry. I'll stop you. We don't know. Presuming it wasn't a robot, there were people in the White House.
John,
we do not know. Larry
knowns.
Johnson, NoQuarter, Mary Kissel, the editorial board of the Wall Street Journal, Opinion Journal, at WSJ.com each day. I'm John Batchelor.